Child custody is nasty stuff, and you might want to know what are the reasons a parent could lose custody. Tune in. We've been in it for a while, Sid.
Yeah, we have.
Oh, child custody is one of the messiest places where you can hang out, and there's a lot of questions that come up about, am I going to lose custody for this? What if I am in this situation? So I just brought you in, Sid, because you're the expert. You've been an attorney in family law for how long now?
27 years.
And so you have seen it. I've seen it on the end of child custody evaluations. Let's get into the list. What is it that can cause a parent to lose child custody?
Well, number one is non-cooperation. And what I mean by that, there are two basic ways to not be cooperative. One is not follow the law and just not allow the visitation that's supposed to happen, not pay the child support, not make an attempt to do those things. And also, I just want to have a little caveat here. It's much better to do what you can do if you can't do the whole thing. For example, if you owe $500 of child support and you can only afford $100, it's much better to pay $100 rather than $0 just because you can't come up with the whole $500. Judges will much more understand that because there are circumstances. But anyway, but not allowing the visitation, and think about this, when you're not allowing visitation, you're starting to alienate. You're starting to have the kids think, well, maybe there's something wrong, maybe there's something dangerous or something like that, or they're starting to adopt your viewpoint only. And kids need both parents. They really do.
Sid, can I go off on that for just a minute? Because
yes.
As a former evaluator, this ticked me off.
Oh.
When I saw a parent who was trying to restrict or alienate a child from the other parent. Now, granted, there's a lot of reasons why you don't necessarily want the kids hanging out with your ex. I get that. As an evaluator, it caused some real heartburn for me because I'm looking at a long-term solution. What can we do that's going to be in the best interest of this child? We're going to come back to that phrase too.
Right.
What is in the best interest of this child? And I know from everything that I've studied in psychology and everything I've experienced in child custody cases, that it is not in the best interest of this child to be alienated from one of their parents. And usually it backfires anyway. That used to tip me over enough that sometimes it would sway my recommendation for custody.
Absolutely.
And it's not in the direction that the alienating parent thought it should be.
Exactly. And this is one of those areas where the law has certain parameters. And there are things that aren't exactly spelled out in the law, that things like being a control freak. Now, there are two ways of being a control freak. One is just having your natural personality and the other person perceiving you as being a control freak. And the other one is actually trying to get the other person to follow through your hoops. Either one of those are very difficult to exactly analyze under legal situations, but they cause alienation and they cause frustration. If I see one of my clients always reacting to, oh, he did this, he won't let me do this unless I do this, then I say, let's be proactive and you just do your thing and stop worrying about the hoops that he's trying to do, because legally we can enforce everything that is actually in the law. But this whole control idea.
Divorce cases are replete with what I call unenforceable rules.
Yes.
And you will compromise your position in a custody case if you're trying to establish more and more of these unenforceable rules. Well, my ex needs to do this or that or this or that, and
Exactly.
you're demanding all of these
That's
things.
exactly what I'm talking about.
Not only is it unrealistic, it's just wrong. It causes a dynamic in the family that's hard.
What are you teaching the kids?
Yeah.
You're teaching the kids this is how you deal with other people in high conflict situations and not get to peace. Instead of get to peace, you get into continuous war. There's a book called Finite and Infinite Games, and the first chapter I'll quote. The first chapter says there are two kinds of games, or at least two kinds of games. One is infinite and the other is finite. Infinite games are played to continue the play. Finite games are played for winners and losers. So how are you playing? Are you playing to win, lose, or are you playing to let's keep this going and keep it going? And I love that idea, and the book goes from there. The second main point is focusing on rights rather than on the children. If you're just focusing on your rights, then you're not paying attention to what's going on with the kids. And this is where it sort of gets tricky. As the kids get older, they're going to get involved in more and more things. When they're 7, 8, 9, 10, they start getting into junior football, baseball, whatever, basketball, soccer. There's all sorts of things that go on, dancing, swimming, all sorts of things. And that starts to interfere with regular schedules for parent time. So parents can either be cooperative about that and help each other and support each other, or they can be jerks about it and say things like, oh, well, that's on my night, so she can't do that. What are you telling the kid? You're focusing on your rights rather than the kid, and that's not a good thing either. And especially if you bring up, oh, daddy's not letting you do this, you're also getting into the alienation again. And that's another, I mean, you're starting to bitter the water or something like that. I hate that. But focusing on your own rights is just never a good idea. However, there's another side of this. You have to also make sure you're not just rolling over every time. I have a client who every time the wife says, well, Johnny really doesn't want to come over next weekend, he says, oh, all right. Well, pretty soon he comes to me and he hasn't seen his child in 3 months. I said, well, stop rolling over, saying, well, Johnny needs to come over and I'm going to have some time with him. That's not the same thing as just focusing on your rights. It's realizing children need both parents, and you need to be assertive and let the child know, hey, I care enough to make sure I'm seeing you as well.
A little comment here from my child development background said, it's not healthy for kids to be able to call the shots.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, that might be counterintuitive to some folks, but think about it this way. If a child is feeling a little insecure, like my world is in upheaval and disruption, and it is when mom and dad are going through a divorce, they sometimes need to have a sense that they're not the ones calling all the shots, because they know they can't handle all of the complexity of this divorce. So they have to hear from both parents occasionally, well, sweetie, I hear you, and our plan is, and you go right back to the plan.
Right.
And I would use the word and instead of but. That's just kind of a psychological tool that you can use. I hear you, and I know that you're concerned about the visit, and this is our plan for a lot of good reasons. So I'm going to support that plan. See, you can do it in a nice way.
Yeah.
You need to continue being the parent and not just, like you said, roll over to everything. But at the same time, I agree 100%, Sid. We don't focus on our rights as much as we focus on the best interest of the child. Keep in mind that the evaluator, the judge, are both focused on that particular standard. What is in the best interest of the children? And quite frankly, they're not as concerned about your rights. Now, your attorney's there to help you make sure that you can meet your rights.
It is in the best interest of the kids for you to exercise your rights because they need contact with both parents. Mm-hmm. But you can't be focusing on that more than you're focusing on the care of the children.
Right. That was well said, I think.
So that's that. The third point is, this is obvious and yet it's also subtle, is abuse and neglect. I have changed custody several times for these other reasons that I've given, and also for abuse and neglect. The reason this is subtle is because kids want to protect their parents. I don't know if that's just a general psychological thing, but kids want to protect their parents. So if something's going wrong in a home, they try to hide it from the other parent quite often. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes they can't wait to tell on the other parent.
It gets overinflamed a lot of times too.
Exactly. But there's exaggeration when that happens. I notice, though, that quite often there's subtle abuse going on. And one time, my client kept telling me, there's something wrong with my child. There's something wrong with my child. I can't quite put my finger on it. And then he realized, I think it's a drug thing. I think that my child is being exposed to drugs. So I had my client do a hair follicle test, and meth came out in the child's hair. We changed custody immediately. But it was hard, and that is a surefire way to lose. If you're abusing or neglecting, doing something illegal, doing something bad, and sometimes parents for some reason don't get that they're going to get caught. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, hopefully, and I don't see that a lot, thank heavens, but other kinds of abuse and neglect. Drug use is unfortunately rampant in some sectors of society. And that is something that when kids get exposed to, I'm in the middle of a case right now that's very sad. The child is being exposed to drug raids and things like that. And we're doing everything we can to bring this to the attention of the court. And that is eventually going to lead, I believe, to a change in custody of this child. And it's sad. But truly, the whole idea here is to figure out a way to cooperate as parents. You can't end your relationship. You can only change it when you have children in common. And you might as well have the most pleasant opportunity for both kids. My wife comes from a divorced family, and she spent Christmas with both parents every single year, and Thanksgiving as well, and some of the holiday time. I know that not every set of divorced parents can get along that well, But my wife didn't suffer from having to ever go through the, if I spend time with dad, I'm not going to be with mom, or if I'm going to spend time with mom, I'm not going to be with dad. If we could get parents to focus on helping children feel comfortable in both places and with both parents, and being able to talk to mom about dad and dad about mom, that would be such a wonderful world. I realize some personalities are never going to get there, but we can encourage everything that's good. But those are the three main points. The non-cooperation, not being the law, that kind of thing is the first one, remember. And also focusing on your own rights rather than the children's rights. And also doing abuse and neglectful things. Those kinds of things are going to lose custody pretty much every time, especially if they're caught. Unfortunately, sometimes money's an issue. Parents come to me and they say, hey, this is going on. I want to go in and enforce this and do that. If you can't afford it, most states have ways to do some self-help and be able to go to the courthouse and fill out forms and get before the judge. And judges are sympathetic. They focus on the kids. So I hope this has been very helpful.
I think that has been helpful. So just from your perspective as an attorney, as a psychologist, I'm over here thinking, okay, one of the reasons we did this video in the first place is because of some of the questions that have come from you, our viewers, on other videos we've done on child custody issues. One of them that I remember was, am I going to lose custody because I have to work? There's so many factors that go into it. Sid, you've hit the main reasons why someone would lose custody. But I want to go back to something that you said early on. This is a game that doesn't have a win or a lose outcome. And our adversarial system in the courts is set up kind of that way, that we're going to win, we're going to lose. If you can just change it in your own mind to more of a, what are some good solutions here? How can I personally as a parent, forget what my ex is doing for a minute, how can I cooperate with something that is reasonable and rational and in the best interest of those children, and then have some confidence that you are a good parent and that you get to continue to be a parent to your child instead of thinking, oh, I might lose custody. Understand that your child now has two worlds that they're negotiating. There's mom's world, there's dad's world. These are very different worlds now. And when they're over in the other parent's world doesn't mean they're completely out of yours. You are still their parent. Continue to show up as that conscious parent. Watch out for these pitfalls that, Sid, you've helped us to illuminate today, and have some confidence that you can continue to do this.
And I would just add as well, if you're worried about, I'm now spending less time at home because I have to work and things like that, the general presumption in the law is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If the children are thriving, even if you're spending less time than you were yesterday or last year or whatever, and they're still thriving, then that's great. Even if you're working more and you're spending direct time with them less. The most common and the most important factor is if everything is okay. If there's not a need to change it, then the judge generally won't do it. And so that's why it takes something sort of extraordinary, like breaking the law or abuse and neglect and those kinds of things. That's why you shouldn't be in constant fear. I'm going to lose custody, because life happens, and life happens to everybody.
So basically the bad news is, yes, you can lose custody. The good news, probably you're not going to. Stay the course, be strong.